Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for our weekly demo. We are very excited that you are here. Just going to give everybody a few moments to situate themselves. So now is a fantastic time to grab some water or a cup of coffee, and we will be ready to start in about 2 minutes. So just going to let everybody filter in. If you're just now coming in, thank you so much for joining us. Just going to give everybody about 1 more minute to filter in. Thanks for your patience. All right, looks like we are ready to go. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us today. We are so excited that you are here. And at this point, I am going to turn it over to Ken and Joe, our presenters.
All right, thank you so much for that, Madison. Thank you everybody for joining us today, and thank you also to Ken for working with me on this presentation, this weekly demo here today. So I am Joe Mastermarino. I am a sales engineer here at AttackIQ. I've been here for a year and some change, been in security industry for a little more than that. And when the topic got brought to me to discuss the Cuba ransomware attack graph, the first person that came to my mind was Ken Town and our adversary research team. Ken, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Hey, everybody, my name's Ken. I'm the technical lead here at AttackIQ on the adversary research team. Prior to joining AttackIQ, I've been working in the DIB and threat intel for over a decade, so I've been around quite a long time.
All right, thanks for that, Ken. And let's go over a quick agenda of what we're going to do today. And what we're first going to talk about is what an emerging threat is. And this is another topic that's pretty near and dear to my heart, not only because this is what I've been doing for so many years, but this is a question that I know comes up quite often from anybody I speak to, any customers that we have, is how do we respond to these types of emerging threats, and what do we offer to our customers and to the community? So that's why I'm excited to speak about that. So Ken is going to be going through a lot of that, as well as our approach, our response, and give us a little briefing on that Cuba ransomware. And then I'm going to take us through a product demo where we're going to show you that Cuba ransomware attack graph in action. So at this point, Ken, I'd like to turn it over to you so you can walk us through the emerging threat process here at AttackIQ.
Perfect. So what we classify as an emerging threat is going to be some security report or alert that has come out. And the three things that we're always looking for, is this timely, right? Is the alert actually about activity that's occurring right now or in the recent past? Sometimes vendors are putting out recaps of what occurred 3-4 years ago, and that's not really as relevant. And that leads into the second point, relevant. So we know what our customers are, what sectors they play in, who their threat actors are. And so we want to make sure that we're going to pick groups that they're likely to be concerned about or potentially have seen attacks against them. And impactful, if it's just like a social engineering side of things, then maybe not a full compromise, right? We want to make sure that any content, anything that we respond to, it is something that a customer can actually run, and there are changes and improvements that they can make to their security posture to better protect themselves. So what are some examples? Obviously, the US CERT alerts, and we're going to cover one later on today, but also things like Folina or Log4Shell, big giant exploits that are trivial to exploit, vulnerabilities that are trivial to exploit, and we see a lot of wide, broad exploitation of them. And so we want to take those on and try to get content out as soon as possible so that customers can start testing whether or not they would be impacted by an actor who's using these same techniques or maybe this specific vulnerability. But it could be really anything. If CrowdStrike were to put out a report tomorrow that covered a large segment of our customer base, we would pick that up too. It's really, as long as it fits those 3 criteria, that's what we're going to pick up. And so when we get an emerging threat, I want to talk a little bit about our approach. How do we consume that intelligence, and how do we turn it into content for our customers? And so the first thing we want to do is read the report ourselves, go through it. We want to start mapping out the techniques that are being used. A lot of times US CERT and security vendors have started to include a table at the end, or maybe somewhere in the paragraphs they're saying, hey, they're using this specific technique, and hopefully they'll provide some context and details as to how they're actually using that technique, their implementation of it, and not just say, well, they collect keystrokes or archive data. We want to try and gather as much technical details as possible so that our emulations will be accurate to what the actors actually performed. So here's a little example of a US CERT alert. They put that table at the end, and we start looking through our pre-existing scenario library that all customers have access to try and map out, do we already have an existing scenario for this? A lot of times we do, but occasionally we do have to write something different. And in this point, we're just trying to map what we have versus don't have. And as we know, when these alerts first come out, they're just the tip of the iceberg. So in the case of like the US CERT alerts, this is usually a trigger for other vendors to start releasing their reporting. Maybe they were working together and had an NDA not to publish until the CERT went live, or maybe different vendors are putting out the same when a vulnerability hits, and they're all going to fill in different components. So we see all these reports start to drop, and we're going to want to do the exact same thing. We spread out, we look through these same reports, try to find any new additional information or information that helps confirm what was in the previous reports, and we can tie all those dots together, similar to trying to make a map, and this way we can get a larger full picture of what their kill chain and their activity looks like, and not just one vendor or one victim's view. On this team, we also have a lot of previous experience and firsthand knowledge. As I mentioned in my intro, I've spent a long time working for the DIB and in threat intel. So a lot of these actors that the reports are covering are people in groups that I've fought against, that I've researched for a long time. So we know a lot of behind the scenes of what they've done and how they've done it. And so we can take our own knowledge and own expertise and put that inside the picture as well. We do have the capability to tear apart malware, and so we do that. And that's important because, as I mentioned, some of those reports, they're not providing the true technical details. They give a very high level view of, oh, they disable tools, or maybe they're making some changes to the registry. Well, what changes to the registry? Are they doing it via PowerShell? Are they running the registry command? Are they importing reg files? What keys are they making changes to? Is it the user keys, the system keys? All of these things are important because it's actually going to help the actor achieve a specific goal. And so we want to make sure that we're also doing it the same way that they're doing it, and that we're achieving the same goals that they're attempting to achieve. When we gather all this information, this is what our output looks like. In the bottom left is where we will write our new scenario. Maybe there's a new method or technique that they're using and we don't have existing coverage, or maybe the actor has added a new wrinkle to it, so we'll modify and update an existing one. And those same scenarios will then be put into our scenario library for all customers to use. And then up in the top, this is what an attack graph looks like. We're going to go into much greater detail and step through one for Cuba Ransomware when we get to the product demo. But basically, this is splitting it up into the chains that the actor is performing to achieve their goals. So different kill chains, different techniques, putting it all together so that it's a realistic graph that flows together, that's performing the actions in the order that the actor would have had to perform them, and then also being able to use the logic to say, yeah, there's no reason for me to try to move laterally if I can't discover any additional network computers. So if I can discover them, then I want to go down this path. So we do these if prevented, not prevented chains, and again, we'll go into those. And then finally, we put out a blog. So the blog will cover the graph that we've released, and we go into great technical detail as to what techniques we're including, how those techniques actually work, and then most importantly, for anyone who isn't super familiar, we offer 3 different detection and mitigation scenarios that they should care the most about. So if you're a customer and you're running this through, some of these graphs and these behaviors can have 40, 50 steps in it, and not every step is as important as another step. And so we want to call out which ones are the ones that you should be prioritizing. Where are the choke points? Which scenario, if you can stop, or groups of scenarios can you stop that would really get you the most bang for your buck? And so that blog release, our main goal with those is to alert customers that, hey, we have some new content. This is an emerging threat. It's important to them. We're going to call out actions that they need to take and make some recommendations. All right, so that's about emerging threats in general. Let's talk about the Cuba ransomware. This was the last alert that the US CERT had put out at the end of last year, their final one, and it's about Cuba ransomware. It's a part of their Stop Ransomware campaign. And so because so many US-based companies were being torn apart by these ransomware operators, they've really put a intense focus on trying to provide different organizations the capabilities to protect themselves against ransomware. So they talk about, what are the controls that you need to have in place, what you should do if you've actually been hit by ransomware, who you should be contacting, what are the most known vulnerabilities that are being exploited. They put all these resources together in a single place so that as an organization you can go learn more about it and hopefully uplift your skills. So to continue to update that page, they release these hashtag stop ransomware alerts. They do it through the US CERT, and they will go into deep dives of a specific ransomware family or ransomware operating group and provide some of the more technical details of how those attacks are actually occurring, who they're impacting, and some additional recommendations. So this last one was actually a follow-up to an FBI flash briefing that was publicly released back in December of 2021. This is the first time that the Cuba ransomware really got any kind of publicity. And in that report, the FBI called out that they had observed in the last year 49 victims in critical infrastructure sectors in the US. This is just US based. And they were primarily targeting the financial, government, healthcare, manufacturing, and IT sectors. And they'd already received almost $44 million in ransomware payments. So not only are they hitting a large number of companies and going faster, but the ransoms that they are getting to actually be paid is significant. And the delivery of these attacks were being done through Hansator. Hansator is a shared cybercrime delivery mechanism that multiple threat actors can use to gain that initial foothold. That access is then sold to them, and then the real actors can go on and do all of their follow-on attacks from there. But just because that was the first time they actually got any press doesn't mean that's when they started. So if we go back, we can actually find posts in a Bleeping Computer forum where someone had been infected by these guys and was asking about, hey, does anyone know how I can decrypt these files without paying the ransom? So 2 years prior to the FBI briefing, these guys were just getting started. They make a lot of references to Cuba and Fidel Castro, but there's no evidence to suggest that they're actually operating out of Cuba or on behalf of Cuba. It's more just their theme. And then on the right side of this screen is some of the initial write-ups that were being posted of people who were researching, hey, how is this thing being detected? What does the ransom note look like? What might it be related to? So this is the first time that anyone had been infected by them. After the FBI briefing, vendors started to release what they had seen. Mandiant or FireEye had published a blog in February of 2022. This time they were talking about a unknown threat group that they were classifying as UNC 2596, and they found it deploying the Cuba ransomware. They believe only a single actor is responsible for all of the Cuba ransomware attacks that were occurring. It does not appear to be a ransomware as a service. So the main difference there is, a developer of a ransomware or someone who's willing to deal with the extortion can sell their ransomware to other hackers, and they would go out and do the compromise and then do the encryption and then rely on the ransomware as a service guys to handle the financial obligations, the payments, and everything like that. And so that's good for both parties because the hackers can focus on what they're good at and getting into victims and exploiting them and deploying the ransomware, while the ransomware guys can handle all the financial side. In this case, Cold Draw, which is Mandiant's name for Cuba Ransomware, is exclusive to a single actor. And they saw them moving beyond the enhanced toward delivery that the FBI had put out. They saw them exploiting a bunch of known vulnerabilities, proxy shell and proxy logon, to gain access besides their phishing. And then not only were they using Cuba Ransomware, but they had started to bring down their own novel malware, so something that's unique and exclusive to them, but we're also using Cobalt Strike in their attacks. And based on their heat map of where victims are, you can still continue to see that the United States and Canada are their main victims, and then very little in Eastern Europe. So that likely gives you a much better idea of where this is coming from. In August of last year, Unit 42 released their report about Cuba Ransomware. They tracked this group as Tropical Scorpius, and this is where they started to talk about a newer malware family that the group was starting to use called Romcom. They actually found that they were using a kernel driver that they were exploiting to target and turn off security products, and that they had their own custom version of a zero logon hack tool. So this allows them to move laterally and get into more organizations. They saw attacks going out to 60 different organizations in their own visibility. So from the 40 that happened in 2021 to 60 plus now that Unit 42 had visibility into, they were continued to expand and go faster and faster. And then one of the cool wrinkles that they found is there are some links to a ransomware as a service called Industrial Spy. So it is possible that these guys are starting to evolve and change what they're doing, and they want to keep Cuba Ransomware for their own needs and then sell access to Industrial Spy so that they can diversify their income and make more money. So this leads us to the actual US CERT alert. This was published at the beginning of December. At this point, the US CERT had identified that they've confirmed over 101 entities were compromised in that year, 65 of them in the US. Their ransom demands have continued to go up. They've requested over $145 million and have actually received over 60 million, so very profitable for them. And a lot of what's covered in this US CERT alert is repeating what was already released in the mandate in Unit 42. So there were no new additional wrinkles besides maybe the scale and the ransoms that were being paid in this alert, but the same techniques, those same vulnerabilities, the same delivery mechanisms were all being reported. So how did we respond to this? So obviously, as soon as the alert comes out, we start piecing together all those different reports, and we built a very complex attack graph or attack flow that moves through the entire kill chain. So that graph is what we're gonna do a product demo. We're gonna zoom in on each of these steps, and it's very hard to see on these slides. And then we released the blog, and we did this within 72 hours of the report being released so that customers can immediately start testing their controls and their security programs against this actor and how they work. Joe, do you want to talk about what attack graphs are?
Absolutely. So when it comes to the attack graphs, and I see we already have highlighted on the screen here the term anatomic. So we have three main modalities of execution when it comes to running attack scenarios in a given environment. One is the atomic, and that's really just kind of running right down the line all of the specific attack scenarios that we want. But when we talk about anatomic, what we're doing is we're taking those scenarios, and in order to do as it says on the screen right here, exercise multiple TTPs to mimic how far you can progress in the kill chain, we're applying logic to the scenarios as they run in a specific order. And we will say whether or not a certain scenario will run based on what happened before. So applying that logic creates it even more close to reality in terms of what an attacker would really do or what a piece of malware would do as it makes decisions based on what happens around it. And then as far as the AttackIQ architecture is concerned, if you haven't looked at it before, I always start talking about this visual right in the center of the screen. That's that web UI axis. It's the machine that you're on this webinar on right now. You would use your web browser to access the AttackIQ platform, typically delivered in a SaaS tenancy. And that's going to hold all of the content that we're talking about, the attack scenarios, think the individual actions. How do we bundle all of those up into use cases that you can just pull off the shelf and run, like this Cuba Ransomware attack graph? All of that is held here. You can also gather up, now this is an agent-based technology, so we will require agents in order to operate these types of assessments inside of your environment. And we have support for Windows, Mac, Linux. These are extremely lightweight agents. They do not hook into the kernel. They do not provide additional protective capabilities. They're essentially a Python worker that's checking in with the platform once a minute to ask, do you have any work for me to do in the form of these attack scenarios, or do you have any updates for me? No, okay, I'll be back in a minute. Once it has work to do in the form of those attack scenarios, it downloads everything that it needs at runtime, unpacks it, stages it, runs it, and then determines whether or not it was successful in doing its job. That's what gets us our prevented or not prevented status. You see that represented in a red-green color status. Now, the agents themselves are completely unaware of your security stack. All the agents know is their job, and that's it. Once those scenarios are complete, it cleans everything up afterwards. So it doesn't leave any other files or registry keys or anything else like that behind. Everything that it creates, it will then remove once it sends the machine back to steady state as part of our cleanup process. The other side of that is, did you see the attacks that we just ran? And that's where Integration Manager comes into place. So the agents will be running the scenarios, and then the Integration Manager will leverage the native APIs of your existing security stack. Think your SIM, think maybe your EDR, EPP, or your firewall, anywhere else that may have an API that we can integrate with to ask those questions that say, did you see this attack that we ran on this host at this time? And then provide you back all of those detections. And you'll see that as a blue and purple color status when we take a look at the platform. And what that gives you is a complete picture of whether or not you stopped and or saw the different attack scenarios as they ran. And when you put them in context of an attack graph like this, you'll know exactly where in the attack lifecycle you are doing well and maybe some areas where you need a little bit of improvement. It's at this point that I think I can grab this and then move over to a platform demo. So I'll steal that screen from you if I may, please, Ken. Thank you. And I'm going to share my screen out now. Perfect. Now, where I start talking about the platform itself, I'll give you a quick primer on the platform itself, how things are laid out, and then we'll dive right into the attack graph. So what you're seeing right here is a representation of our scenario library. We have a few thousand attack scenarios in our library right now. If I were to take a look at really any one of these, I can take a look at this password brute force, for instance. The crown really just means that it's a template upon which other scenarios are built. I can view this and see a plain English language description of any one of these scenarios. It tells you what this scenario is trying to do. We also give you in here guidance on how to use the different parameters that we have within any given scenario, which allows you for ease of customization of any of our scenarios at any time. We do try to leave this as open as possible for you. So where we do give you more than enough that you'll be able to get started with, we also make it very easy for you to customize this, not only in terms of the parameters that you can set and of course save your own copy of another scenario, but we provide you visibility into the source code of all of our attack scenarios, generally written in Python, and we expose that code to you as well as methods with which you can write your own attack scenarios should you choose to go that path. We do also provide excellent organization of the attack scenarios in the form of, and you see this down here, these scenario tags. We tag the scenarios in terms of what attack tactic, techniques, sub-techniques, if they're applicable. If there are threat actors that are known to use these different types of scenarios, if there are pieces of malware that are known to use these. So we use these all throughout the platform to help you organize yourself as you're looking at all of this content. Now you may be saying to yourself, well, that's a lot of content, but you said I could just pull stuff off the shelf and use it. And of course you can. So when I take a look over at the assessments, that's what I'm looking at here. These assessments are different use cases that you can pull right off the shelf and use. The first ones I'm looking at is what I had mentioned earlier in the slides was one of these atomic ones. And these are really focused on security control validation. Can I run scenarios against insert name of control here, whether it's my network-based antivirus or my host-based endpoint protection solution, or I'm looking at some other type of endpoint solution technology. Many of these are named as well. And then we also have as part of that research are 7 deadly techniques, which are really 7 techniques that that may be used that may not necessarily be caught by other technologies based on our research, and we have other research there as well. Just showing you that there's certainly a lot more even that we're talking about here today. But I'm going to focus specifically on the threat emulation section, and if I wanted to find the Cuba ransomware one in the platform, this is all I would need to do in order to get there. So I take a look right here. It shows me a description of, and this is a great overview of what Ken was just going over the last few minutes. It does also give you some directions on what to do. See step 6 and step 34. Step 6, we do require you to supply your own add-find binary because it's really a software licensing issue. We really can't provide that software ourselves, although we will tell you where you can go and get it. And then the Black Hat file encryption really just requires a file path so that we know where to go to try to encrypt files. I'll let Ken speak to that in a few minutes. And then, of course, all of our sources for the research that we've been doing for it. When I want to pull this thing off the shelf and use it, all I would need to do is click the Create Assessment button, and it would show me that, yes, of course, I have some others that are here already. I've been prepping one just for you guys so you could see it. But that's all I would need to do. And then the next screen that I would be brought to looks like this. And this is that eye chart that Ken was mentioning earlier. We're going to take that eye chart apart. So again, the summary is right up here. So all of that information is all there for you. I'm just going to get this little box out of the way so we get a little bit more screen real estate. And what we've done is up top here, we have all of the content sitting in order. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this much less of an eye chart, and now we can start going through the individual steps. Ken, do you want to take us through the first couple of steps here about these downloads and saves to file systems?
Absolutely. So one of the first things we do with a lot of these threat emulations is most of the time they're going to start from some malware. And these scenarios are meant to simulate the downloading and saving of those different malware families. And the reason why they're split up is because they're testing different kinds of controls. The download scenario is testing your network controls, while the save scenarios would be testing your controls on the endpoint. And this is a great example of where the if prevented and if not prevented starts to come into play. So if I am able to successfully download, then I'm going to follow the red path and then try the save. So if I can't download it, there's no reason for me to test the saving of it because that data was never actually downloaded to begin with. So we will split and pivot that way.
Fantastic, thanks for that. I'll pick a few up from here as well. So the next couple of things that the graph is going to try to do is we want to try to establish persistence on the box now that we've got that initial foothold. So we'll try to use a new service here in Windows to establish persistence on the box. And then the next thing I want to understand is, well, what's my environment look like? What's around me? So we'll now try to run a security software discovery script and see what it is that we're dealing with as the attacker on the box. As it continues moving through, it's going to try to continue to do more discovery. This is that step 6 that I had mentioned earlier about add find. And let me just show you this here real quick. So when I click on, I apologize, I should have right-clicked on that. There we go, configure my scenario parameters. You can tell it right here exactly what domain you want to go after, and then you would simply apply the binary that you get here. So that's how you would be able to put that in. Again, we make it very easy for you to configure these scenarios. So from here, let's take a look around the environment. What does my Active Directory environment look like? And then within this host as well, what other accounts might I have access to? So again, I'm really just taking a look around, seeing what's around me. And then the next thing that I want to try to do is to see if I can expand and extend my access across the environment. So I'm going to try to dump some Windows passwords out here using Mimikatz in order to really try to extend that reach. I'm also going to, and Ken did mention this earlier, trying to use Zero Logon. So we're going to try to grab those files as well. Similar process to what he was talking about before, trying to get that, that login hack tool to memory and then over to the file system. The next thing that we're going to do there is to try to use that pass the hash using dump credentials. Again, we're trying to really move our way around the environment and see however else we can get around. The next thing that we're going to do is grab that that bespoke rom-com excuse me, that ROMCOM remote access Trojan that's here, that's over in steps 13, 14. And then we're going to try to escalate privilege here by executing that through using DLL through run DLL32. So grab the file and then try to execute. And then we're going to try to establish persistence here using a scheduled task. So you can see how it's following through the process all the way. And you can see how we're showing you the logic of each of these steps as it moves step by step. It will continue to do some more discovery here in steps 17 and 18, doing more information discovery about the system itself, as well as what other peripherals may be attached to that box. So, excuse me. So that's everything that happens before it's going to try to check in with that ROMCOM C2 server. So it gets all the information about the system, any drives that may be connected to it. So it has a really good feel for what this machine has and has access to. At this point, Ken, would you like to talk about the C2 communication that it tries to establish with ROMCOM?
Yeah, for step 19, this is actually a custom scenario that we wrote that emulates the network traffic that ROMCOM makes when it makes its initial HTTP post. So besides simulating all of the on-host behaviors that you were seeing in those previous discovery steps, we're also now making a request out to an AttackIQ controlled C2 server so that we can send the actual C2 traffic to it and give a response back that looks like what ROMCOM would send. And then if it's able to successfully do that, it would move on to the next stage. If it's unable to do that, ROMCOM actually has a backup command and control where it will use ICMP packets. So we have a scenario that simulates that same kind of activity.
That's fantastic. And that's really what we were talking about before, right, Ken, where you take the stuff apart and you're able to put it right back into scenarios that customers can use,
Yep.
Yeah?
Exactly.
Amazing. So it moves on from there because we're still trying to find whatever else we can get access to in steps 20 and then 22. So we're going to try to stage, we're going to try to set the stage here to initiate our ransomware campaign. The parent PID spoofing that we're doing here, so we're going to try to, again, escalate privileges and really blend in as an already legitimate process. We're really trying to evade those controls as much as we possibly can before we try to bring down and then install that final payload. Because now you see we're getting over here in step 25 and step 26 that we're trying to get over to that Cuba ransomware save to memory in the file system. So then after we get to that, we get to that system location discovery. I think, Ken, you had a couple of words to say about here steps 27 and 28.
Yeah, so for 27 and 28, and you maybe see that system information discovery was run in a previous step in this graph. The reason why it occurs here is because it's being actually executed by the malware. So the actor is repeating some of the same commands that maybe their tools had done prior. What the actor is attempting to do here is ensure that they're infecting the right kind of victim. And this goes back to the FireEye heat map, where you see that the majority of victims are in the US and Canada and not in Eastern Europe. So it's checking the code page and what language is set for the system to make sure it doesn't infect its own safe territories.
Has its own safeguards. I love that. So again, it's doing this discovery one more time, grabbing the system information, grabbing the file discovery information. It's going to repeat some of those same discovery steps to validate that it's on its intended target. So it does all of that, and then it goes through, and the last thing that it does before it's going to start its encryption process is to find any network shares and any other connected hosts that are on that are connected to this box over here. And then of course it's going to do that parent PID spoofing one more time to try to hide itself. And then finally it's going to go through the black hat file encryption. So Ken, do you want to tell us why we picked black hat file encryption here?
Sure. So you might be asking, why not do Cuba Ransomware file encryption? And the reality is a lot of ransomware families will use the same kind of techniques. Maybe it's a specific extension exclusion or different algorithms. And in this case, they're both using the CHA-20 encryption. So Black Hat does that same thing. And so we're just going to reuse an existing scenario that's going to encrypt the files the same way. And if you go into the parameters for this one, you'll see that the only change that we've made, because you can put custom parameters just in an attack graph without modifying the original scenarios, is we've added this .cuba file extension. So that's the .cuba name that will be given when the files get encrypted. And one thing to note is there are backups made of all of the files before we would encrypt them. That was something that Joe talked about. Everything we do is meant to be run in production and safe, so we have safe rollback mechanisms to make sure that no data is actually lost, and none of the malware that's being downloaded and saved to disk is being executed either. All the steps that follow on after that are using AIQ safe binaries that we have created ourselves to perform those malicious actions.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's a very important differentiator there. Thanks for that, Ken. And then the only other piece of this you would have to configure is the starting path, where you're going to put it. Our recommendation is to put it into a starting path that you know what information is going to be sitting in that directory. Though, of course, there are a couple of other options you can use. This is just the one I happen to have right here that I know is perfectly fine. But yeah, those are the only two steps you would need to configure, is this one and the Active Directory discovery one before, where we had to pop in add find. So that's all the content that goes into this attack graph as I zoom all the way back out again. And then where do you run it? So you can select any number of assets within your environment. These are the machines right here as I click my little pencil icon. These are the machines I've selected to run this attack graph on. Maybe these are different sections of my network. Maybe these are different endpoint control policies that I have inside of my network, and I want to test out how all of them are going to operate with this type of attack stimulus. So I would have all of that set. I can also set this so that it runs under the context of a given user. So I can assign user privileges here. By default, it'll run as system on a Windows box, although I can set this to be really any type of account that I want. I set this all up in my configurations, so I can run this under the context of a given user. I can choose to run something like this. Now, something that's really kind of a rapid response like this, I may just want to go and say, yeah, let's just run this right now. And for that, I would say, yeah, let's just click the Run Now button. And what would happen is it would give me this warning that it would say exactly what Ken and I have been saying this entire time. These are not going to do any permanent changes. They are meant to mimic behavior and activity, although they will trigger alerts in your security technologies, and they should. You should be seeing alerts coming back from your security technology. You should be seeing things pop into your SIM. You want to understand that those things are there, but they're not going to be doing any harm to your machine. And I would click that Run Now button, and things would immediately start to fire off. These scenarios typically take by and large a matter of seconds to run, and then we start kicking off the searches for the integration shortly thereafter. You can also, as part of our platform here, we talk about continuous security validation. You want to try to run something like this over and over again, you absolutely can. You can run a schedule on any of the assessments that we have, set up that cadence whenever you want, hourly, weekly, monthly, whatever it is that you want, and be able to understand the results over time. So when I take a look at the results of this assessment as I've been running it, I would be able to see this nice little histogram that starts to get built up over time. How well are we performing? My yellow bar telling me in a percentage how much of this attack have we prevented. My gray bar, how much have we detected, and that green bar kind of being the either or, did we stop or see. This looks fairly binary because what we're concerned about in this case is whether or not we stopped the attack. We'll get into the details of where we stopped the attack, but did we stop it at all is the first thing that we're concerned about. And that's what I'll dive into right here. I can click on one of these assessment runs, and it will show me how each of the hosts then performed. So I'd be able to see right here, yes, I have, and I did run this with the domain privileges of just a regular domain user, not domain admin or anything. So I ran this on one host here, and I will take a look at, and this is really important because it does show you a few different things. Now, I like to have these colors on screen here and these different visual indicators, because what this says is that based on the scenarios that we ran, we were not able to stop step 0, 1, 2, or 3. So all of the malware initially was able to get onto the box, both through the network and the endpoint. We was able to stop the attack here at the new service. Now I could dive into any one of these and see exactly what happened. So I take a look at my activity details, and it's going to show me from the perspective of the agent whether or not I was able to do this, and I was not, and here's why. Fantastic. I was able also to see that these things got dropped to memory. So like we said, these are network-based security controls that we're looking for. We saw these files coming in, we just didn't have the policy up to stop them. And maybe this is a matter of, and I take a look at my mitigation recommendations, that I validate that my policies are appropriately set to stop these types of malicious files from reaching my endpoints. So that's what it's going to give you for every one of these. And of course, you get that detail for every one of these scenarios as they ran. The grayed out ones that are over here, these did not run because we were able to stop the attack at this stage. If we wanted to move things around a little bit and see how well we perform later on down the chain, we can absolutely do that. But this provides you the visual right up front of this is where we were able to stop this attacker on this host at this time. So I have some action items in terms of things that I need to do on my network and endpoint security controls, but I have a little bit more confidence knowing that we were able to stop the new service being started here as they establish an initial foothold, though I may want to continue on and do some more additional tests later on down the trail. Ken, was there anything else that you wanted to add to this visual here?
No, I think this is a great time to point out that new service is one of the techniques that we call it in our blog as one of the main choke points. Basically, really any of the persistence mechanisms that customers should focus in on and trying to make sure that they've got visibility into and prevention controls in place to try and stop them there. A lot of malware will try to break up their process chains by using a new service or a scheduled task and actually stop doing what they're doing and then wait for that persistence mechanism to kick in for the next stage to occur. So if you can deny them there, you potentially, just as this graph shows, prevent you from having to deal with everything down the chain.
Fantastic. Thanks for that drop in, Ken. And not only do you have this visual right here, which I think is extremely powerful in and of itself, there is lots of reporting that comes along with the platform as well. So you do get some detailed reports that can come out of this. You would be able to see where you were able to stop the attackers, what hosts were able to or not able to stop the attack. And really, this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the different types of reporting that we can provide here in the platform. So that's my platform demonstration portion here. I honestly haven't been able to see anything in the chat. Were there any questions in the chat that we need to be able to answer before I get into the last couple of slides?
Hey, Joe. No, it looks like we're all good in the chat, so you can continue.
Fantastic. All right, let me grab my slide deck here. I got my last couple of slides to go through. Because you want to be able to do some of this stuff here yourself, I would assume. I mean, I hope so. It's fun stuff. So let's go from my current slide here. And yeah, I'm just going to pause my screen here for just 1 second. And okay, this thing's been a little weird with me, and that's all right. Let me bring this up on screen here from current. There we go. Resume that screen. Okay, so the next thing that you would want to know is where can I go to learn more? So what you can do as well is that you can go to the AttackIQ Academy. AttackIQ Academy is a completely free educational resource that we provide to the global community. We have well over 34,000 students registered at AttackIQ Academy today. We provide free, high-quality, instructor-led training. You can learn about all different types of things in information security, including ways to work with purple teaming, MITRE ATT&CK, AttackIQ, and even doing things like working with some of these other examples of attack graphs like Ken and I have been walking you through here today. So there's a lot of really good information in there. The courses can also count for CPE credits if you need to keep up those certifications. So all of that is there and available for you. Please take advantage of that. You can reach there at academy.attackiq.com. Another thing that I would encourage you to take a look at is our free trial. If you wanted to try to run this inside of your environment today, you can try it out for 2 weeks on us. Reach out. I'm going to give you a link for that in just a moment. You can run some. We do have some assessments that are there. You download one of the agents. You take a look at that and see how it performs inside of your environment, and take a look at the results that you would get from it. You can reach there at attackiq.com/free-trial. Please give that a shot. And then one other thing that I would encourage you to take a look at, and this is right on the back of everything that Ken was talking about today, is our adversary research team. So all of that intelligence that you were just seeing here today, some of the ways that we build those attack graphs, there are blog posts that we have there as well. We have lots of research that we publish for the community and give our insights on many things that are happening across attacker groups, different types of malware families. So all of this happens, and we continuously give this information back to the community. So please take a look at attackiq.com/research. You can also sign up for notifications to get this stuff right into your inbox. And feel free to follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter at AttackIQ. So that really goes through the demonstration of looking at the Cuba Ransomware attack graph, how you can take a look at that and the value it provides to your environment, as well as where you can go to get a lot more information from our academy, to our research, to our free trial. There's lots of great stuff that you can do right off the back of this meeting here today. So I would certainly like to thank I'd like to thank everybody for sitting with us today and going through all of this content. Certainly love to thank my co-presenter here, Ken, for walking through all that fantastic content and all the things that you do for us as well as the community. So thank you all very much for your time and attention here today. Ken, anything else from you before we depart?
No, thanks, Joe.
All right, thank you all so much.
Thanks, Joe and Ken. Just one final thing. I want to let you all know that Purple Hats registration has opened today. This is super exciting. It's a free conference. You can sign up at purplehats.org. It only takes 2 minutes to sign up, so I really encourage you to go and do that right after this webinar. Thank you so much again, Ken and Joe, and for everyone who joined. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.